Can you put something in the comments? Oh! Oh!
Well, this is an embarrassing start. It was an embarrassing start because
that was a great interview. Thanks for your time.
So sorry, guys. So really interestingly, Scott and I were going on and starting having this conversation, and then I just said to Scott, that I hadn't pressed the go live button properly, so we were just talking to ourselves. So it was great. So we've had a rehearsal. I'm Scott. He's Scott. We're matchy today, and we're super sorry for being late. And the funny thing is that out of the two of us, I'm the geek, right? You'd think I'd get the technology right, yeah? So anyway, whatever. Here we are. So as I was saying, we've had a little dress rehearsal.
How do you think we went in the dress rehearsal?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was pretty good. Yeah,
the content was great. I'm spewing. Really didn't share
it. Yeah. Well, we've had one crack at it. Let's see if we can improve on it. So, guys, in today's episode, I can't believe I did that. In today's episode, one of the things that I wanted to do was to go a little bit deeper on empathy, and just to share, personally, I've spent an awful lot of my career trying to help people understand their customers or understand their potential customers, understand why people buy things, why they have certain voting preferences, why they exude certain behaviors, and so on and so forth. And a lot of the time, brand choices and so forth is often about what's between the ears as opposed to socioeconomics or whatever. It's usually about belief systems and so forth, which is all very interesting. But what I've found is that there's also contextual elements that, force people into certain behaviors. So, and when I started working in the social sector in 2020, I found these contextual elements to be seriously real. So in the first instance, you found that there were different points of vulnerability around communities in Australia, whether they are health vulnerabilities, whether they are economic vulnerabilities, whether they were access issues, or whether they are industry dependent issues. There were a whole range of issues. And in fact, when we first started modeling that stuff, you could look at a community and it would tick all four boxes. And, it was like literally, I must remember not to live there. But one of the things around these contextual elements that really, stood out, particularly through COVID, is, one story that stands out to me particularly is Baulkham Hills, that went from something like 1,600 job seekers to 16,000 in a very short space of time. And the interesting thing about the Baulkham Hills, a larger area I'm talking, which is including Castle Hill and so forth in Sydney, is that those areas are full of middle Australia, really. I mean, double income dependent, young children, pretty high mortgage commitments and so forth. And what you could assume is that, the job seeker participation went up because, one of those two people at least in the household lost a job. The other thing that happened out of that, which I found out anecdotally, was that domestic violence in that area went through the roof. And there were limited facilities for women in that area because it was, I guess it's not as common an event in that area day to day. But it went through the roof, and it makes sense. These people were under an abundant amount of pressure, and so on and so forth. So the other thing that occurred to me, recently, and Scotty was talking to me about it, was about the amount of single mothers that are sleeping in cars at the moment, and just how incredibly sad that is. But it's contextually based. I mean, a lot of these women may well have been victims of domestic violence. They may well have fled the home and taken the children. And if you're a non-working single mother, try getting a rental in Australia. I mean, have a go and see how you go. I mean, I could only assume that must be like nigh impossible for these people to get accommodation. But again, there's contextual reasons that these people find themselves in these situations of vulnerability. And I think all too often we assume it's because they've done the wrong thing, or they haven't done enough, or they should just get a job. What's wrong with these people? It's not true. There are real contextual reasons that people find themselves in these situations. And Scotty was telling me this story about a woman he met the other day. So I'll let you jump in there, Scott.
I'm just as you're talking, right? I'm just, before I share the story, I'm going to make a statement, and when are we going to be more responsible for our decisions, and when are we going to start making decisions that are smarter? Like, I'm sitting here and I know what's coming, and I'm thinking about a woman and a child sleeping in their car, and I'm thinking about the fact that there's no housing at the moment, and I'm thinking about the fact that like, there's situations that they're going to work through, and we're just about to bring in 2 million additional new Aussies. We've got no housing now. We can only build 400,000 houses a year in Australia. We've got nowhere to house people yet. In the next 2 years, we're going to bring 2 million people. Why? In China, they build the city and then allow the people to move in. How about we take a breather, build some cities, and let people move in? Like, when are we going to take responsibility for our actions? And I think this comes back to this whole piece, right? We've got a mother and a child sleeping in the car. Now, as I turned up to the car park in Hastings, where there's a toilet block, there was 6 cars with people sleeping in their cars, right? And that's one car park. One car park. How many people are sleeping in their cars right now? I can tell you of people that I know personally. There's 4 I know personally. I'm also gifted the opportunity to spend more time with people that have trouble getting through things. But 4's too many. 1's too many. We're humans.
Yeah.
We're meant to be in this advanced society where we're looking after one another. But as I said earlier, right, where this today is really, really important for me to project to everybody. I'm not coming on here today to make you feel guilty about this situation. I have no intention on that. I don't want to do that. My intention for this is to get a deeper understanding so we can find better solutions moving forward. I said earlier, talking about a CEO who's more dangerous at the moment, a CEO with 1,000 employees that's going out and smashing himself up on a weekend because he can't handle all the pressure that's coming at him because of all the rule changes and everything that's going on in the minute. That if he implodes, 1,000 people end up without jobs, like in Balkan Hills, and then we end up in this opportunity where there's more people sleeping in the car. So there's an empathy as a whole. It's not just about one demographic. It's about every demographic. How do we get a better understanding of one another? How do we support people? How do we take the opportunity to allow people to have an honest conversation? We're talking about Balkan Hills, right? We're talking about how it went from 1,600 to 16,000. Domestic violence went up because there was nowhere to process those emotional situations. We didn't gift one another the time or the space to be able to sit there and actually unpack it away from the situation so that we can move forward with a more positive outcome. Why do I know so much about that, Scotty? Because I wouldn't have ended up on the streets if that was gifted to my mother. I wouldn't have ended up on the streets if that was gifted to my father to be able to actually work on things, if we had the tools to do that. But here's the kicker. Here's the big kicker. Only now, since we've had all these opportunities around mental health awareness and the impact of our emotional situations, is this even a conversation? We are living in the best time ever as humans. COVID, no COVID, doesn't matter. We are starting to learn the impact of our emotions, our response to situations. Under pressure, You go back to the response of your big emotional situations in life. You respond accordingly to the emotion that you're feeling, and that is the emotion that you push out. So in order to get different understanding, we've got to create different experiences around emotions. Today, Empathy Series, we're talking a little bit about those sleeping rough. We're talking about a CEO that's under pressure. Empathy. Empathy is just taking the time to understand something and then making better decisions yourself based upon the new knowledge you have. It's an
Yeah.
opportunity to grow. Empathy
Yeah.
is one of the most beautiful things we can have for one another, but it comes from a place of understanding and curiosity. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry,
Yeah,
I've
I
gone off
agree.
in
And I think it's interesting because one of the things that I find super interesting is that, I have lived a privileged life. There's no question about that.
Why?
Oh, well, I never did without as a child. I had plenty, I had everything I needed and, went to a private school, had all those things, had all those opportunities. Um, I didn't miss out on anything as a kid. And, so, in a sense, I feel, when you see children that have come from intergenerational trauma, when you see people that have come, you know, from intergenerational unemployment, those sorts of scenarios. Um, I haven't had that in my family. I haven't had that um, certainly other things I've had to inherit um, from my family, and I would say they're probably fear and anxiety, but I haven't had the struggles. Probably if the one thing I'd say is that if I hadn't have chose to be an entrepreneur, I probably would have had an easier life. And that's one thing for sure. But really, because I've spent so much time studying people and studying their belief systems and studying, what it takes for them to get to a point of hope, what it takes for them to get to a point. And we were having this conversation the other night at dinner. Um, a lot of people in socioeconomic areas, um, they live for today,
Mm.
right? They live for today. They do not live for tomorrow because they don't have hope. And in order to get these people to hope, it's a gradual effort. And if you look at, I did some work on, dare I say it right now, the Voice campaign, um, and one of the things I noticed about Indigenous communities is not only their reluctance to take risk and their very conservative views of the world, but also their lack of trust in authority, and further, when it came to hope, they wanted in bite-sized chunks because, I said to one of the guys I was advising, you can't walk up to a guy with a broken bicycle with two flat tires and missing spokes and say, here's my Lamborghini. I mean, people are, in these situations, and this is what I think the social services sector or the charity sector fails to realize. Even the corporate sector, when we talk to vulnerable customers, you fail to realize that the kinds of things that you're talking to are disconnected to the way and the belief systems that people have who are vulnerable. And, I think that disconnection causes real harm. And, and unfortunately, there's almost victim blaming. And in a real irony, that there's victim blaming amongst some of the most well-intended charities in Australia that will say, oh, people don't engage with our services because they're ashamed and they're embarrassed and blah, blah. And it's like, okay. So if I'm McDonald's, yeah, and I all of a sudden realize that everyone's buying KFC, do I sit still and go, oh, that's a shame. I hope they remember what our burgers are like. Or do you make goddamn chicken burgers? And in the end, we have to meet people where they are in order to be of use to them. And I don't see that happening enough in the social sector. I don't see it happening enough in society. And also, from a curiosity point of view, like, we talk about empathy. Empathy requires a curiosity. And before meeting Scotty, I would be reluctant to stop and have a chat to a homeless person. I do it all the time now. And I do it all the time because, I know the value of these people being acknowledged. I know how much they value being acknowledged as a human being, right? With real needs. And and real desires. And I stopped and talked to a guy in Mentone the other day, and he'd found himself. He said he's got some physical and mental health issues. He's got an NDIS plan. He's been in and out of temporary housing, and we just talked about his scenario, right? And right down to the fact that he told me that he used to runs laps of the local football field at night to stay warm, right? And so contextually now I'm starting to understand what his life's like, and also understood how he got to this situation that he was in. What happened with his marriage, what happened with his work based on his health situation, all those sorts of scenarios. And I also realized, having talked to him, how much responsibility he was taking for trying to get himself out of that situation, right? How much responsibility he was taking to get himself out. He was across it all. He knew all the NDIS stuff. He actually thought he needed a new support coordinator. I didn't think they were doing enough. He knew his accommodation options. He was following them up. He was filling in the forms. He was doing everything he could to get out of the scenario he was in. He also explained to me his reluctance because he'd been offered to go into some aged care facility, and naturally he said to me, "I don't want to be around a whole bunch of old people. Like how's that going to work for me?" And I said, "Well, mate, it's a roof over your head, and maybe that's a start, right?" But we just had this open, curious conversation, and what I learned about this guy is that he wasn't useless. He had a drinking problem. Definitely. And he openly admitted that. He openly admitted that to me, that had been a real issue for him. But, in the end, he's not sitting there like wanting people to just throw change at him. He's actually trying to change it himself. And so what I took away from that is that Frankie, his name is, he was taking responsibility for what was going on. I also spoke to another guy in the city, earlier in the year. And, his situation, a forklift driver, marriage breakdown, lost his gig. Now he's in a situation where he's like, I'm having trouble because I don't have an address. So when I try to get a job, not having an address is it's a problem for people. There are 4 shower facilities for homeless people in Melbourne CBD, and he knows where they are. He knows what to do. His main concern is his safety at night. And he's picked certain stairwells in certain buildings where no one's going to steal his stuff. Like he's kind of, figured all that out. But he's in this real catch-22 where, he has skills. He's a forklift driver. He wants to get a job, and he can't get housing. Because he can't get housing, he doesn't have an address. That's really quite difficult for him to get a job. There are contextual reasons why people find themselves in these situations. And I think if we're more curious as people, right, about these scenarios, we will connect better, and that goes for people who are well-intended, well-educated people who are working in the social sector, who want to make a real difference, right? You got to meet people where they are. So if people aren't engaging with your services as they are, change your goddamn services. It's simple, right? If a retailer was suddenly not selling goods, right, what would you do? You'd change your range. You change your locations. You do something, right? You do something to be more appealing to your customer base, right? And in this case, our customer base that we're talking about a lot is people who are doing it hard, people who are doing it hard, who are vulnerable out there, and they're vulnerable for reasons, right? And it's not always on them. I'm not saying it's not sometimes. I'm sure it is sometimes. But, that's something that people really need to understand. I'm sure Scott's got a lot to add to that.
It's where to start. I'm actually going to start with one of the comments. There are over 1 million empty houses in Australia, 13 million unused bedrooms.
Yep.
Right. And we've created this world of abundance. At what cost? What is our genuine cost of that abundance? 1 million homes sitting empty. Ownership is a big problem about how we do that. But like everything, it's extremely complex these days. We've got this beautiful big growth that the human race has had and without a lot of responsibility taken in that. So I can you throw that comment up so people can have a bit of a look? But I just
how do I do that?
it's
Oh yeah,
I just click on it and then it comes up.
thank you.
Just click on go to the comments, then just click on the comment, and then it'll just there you go. See, that's it. Educate you quite well there, Scotty.
Yeah,
And
thank you. I'm a StreamYard rookie. Look, come on.
I think you're doing well. Like, it's all good. But I just think we need to look at the situations that we're currently running. Just chuck that up. So I'm gonna go through that with Matt's other comment down the bottom. I really want to run through that. 4 million 400 right here. No, down the bottom, please, Scotty.
Oh, sorry. There's been more comments.
Yeah, so just keep scrolling down. You'll get the hang of this. This is the best part about being live because we're able to interact and actually address comments as they come up.
And what I'm finding really disturbing is that you are informing me about technology, which is
oh, mate,
very rare occurrence.
All right, so 400,000 homes that can be built and 2 million people coming, right? Scotty, it would be great for you to crunch the numbers. Everything is statistic, as you know, but to trust the media story is always an issue. The vast amount of people, from my experience of being homeless, was that they had mental or addiction issues that tied both arms behind their back. Vulnerable is a flow issue. Unfortunately, sometimes you spiral and you don't believe there is an exit. Now, that is 100%. Can you just click that off, please, Scotty?
Yep.
So one of the interesting things that I get the opportunity to do is to talk to a lot of people sleeping rough. Like, so I get to go and sit and have a conversation. I've got a tool that allows me to connect and shares a story. But then I ask them how they ended up there. And long-term rough sleeping or homeless is a big issue. And it stems from kids, being in domestic violence situations more often than not feeling safe and then leaving, and it's one of the things that for me has become really super important in my life. Like if I look at some of the great opportunities I've had of meeting people and discussing these issues, it comes back to one thing that we need to do more often is create more safe places to actually unpack the emotional situations that we have in life. Because if we don't, they sit inside us, they boil away, and they explode in places that we don't want them to explode, right? And that ongoing issue, that pain, that continual pain, it goes into everybody around us. And I think that for me is if we start there, if we start with the opportunity of people, I often say, may or may not have heard me say, problem is not the problem. It's how we respond to the problem that either causes the pain, the lesson, or the opportunity. Right now, we've got a lot of pain. It takes bravery to own that pain. It takes courage to sit and process it and find the lessons. But when we do that, together we can create new opportunities. And I think that's where we're at now. And it actually takes this is the single best thing about all of this, Scotty. All we need to do to make a difference is take responsibility for ourselves, take responsibility for our own impact. Then when we're in that position, take the opportunity to understand other people. Take the time to sit and listen to their real story. I've literally sat with hundreds of suicidal men. It's been my greatest gift ever because I've got to learn the pain points. People are honest with me in that point. They're honest, completely honest. I learn what holds people back from, the joy of life. And I get to implement that. It's a gift for me. When people share their pain and in a safe environment, that is the key to it. It has to be a safe place where somebody can facilitate that open conversation with curiosity. That magic, that permission other people get by hearing that story and owning that gives them permission to own their story. And that's the most beautiful thing. And so, anyway, I'm on a big mission, as you know, Scotty, to do that, but it's going to take one thing. One thing. We're going to have to open our doors. We're going to have to walk outside and we're going to have to say hello to the people in our life. We're going to have to say hello to the other humans that we exist with. We're going to have to thank them for doing their best right now. Do you know anybody that's ever made a decision to make the wrong decision, Scotty? You ever made a decision going, do you know what? Today I'm going to do this because it's going to be wrong.
Of course.
No one's ever done that, right?
No.
So all we need to do is understand why they made those decisions. And if we take the time to understand why those decisions were made, we can go back and go, oh, okay, well, what if we did this? Oh, that becomes a lesson. What if? And all of a sudden we create a new opportunity. But it all starts with taking a step outside the door and saying, thank you for doing your best right now. Let's go to one another. Let's not go away from one another. Let's not expect them to come to us. Let's go to them.
And let's understand, what the situation is. And Alan's just put up a comment. I'll just put up quickly about the power of the voice. And look, I just want to, I don't want to get into any political wahoo about whatever, but I did a lot of analytical work on Indigenous communities for that campaign earlier in the year. And what I found was a cohort of people that had a very low trust of authority. Gee, I wonder why. They had very high risk aversion. They didn't like taking risks. And when it came to hope, they wanted it in bite-sized chunks. They didn't believe in revolution. They believed in incremental steps. They could believe in incremental steps. And, some of the guys who are representing the campaign are talking about this like it's a revolution. And, it's akin to walking up to somebody with a broken bicycle with 2 flat tires and broken spokes and saying, take the keys to my Lamborghini. And also let's not forget, there's a lot of people out there who are angry about the fact that there's billions of dollars that go into the Indigenous communities every year to thousands of organizations. We know that. We know it's not effective so far. It doesn't appear to be anyway. But the other thing is, Indigenous communities in Australia also know that. They also know that. They know that this money is flowing through organizations and bureaucracies that is not making its way to their people, not giving their children opportunities for better education or sporting opportunities or opportunities that they didn't have when they were kids, right? And that's what they want, right? And so, a lot of these organizations that have been representing, the campaign are talking about our mob and our people, and no, bullshit. It's their family, right? It's their family. And you can be our when they decide that you're representing them properly, right? And so there's a lot of, let's say Caucasian Australians out there saying this is BS, blah, blah, blah. But trust me, the feedback from Indigenous communities is the same, right? Exactly the same. And they have the same frustration. And so, if we want to help people progress in life, if we want to give them hope, and this is the thing about vulnerable communities that Scott and I were talking about at dinner the other night, when you're vulnerable, you live for today. There isn't a magnitude to think about tomorrow. There is a very little propensity to think about tomorrow. And so, and this is why you find we're actually starting to find what they call in the US food deserts, where, basically there's nothing available but Taco Bell. We have that here. We have that here in Australia, and it's evolving and it's happening quickly, where fast food outlets are in lower socioeconomic areas, in high number, and so nutritional food. Why? Because these people live for now. They live for now. The consequence of eating that food, its health consequences and so forth, they're not thinking about that because they don't think they've got an opportunity. They don't think they've got an opportunity for tomorrow. So everything they're doing is right now, and that's why we're starting to see similar food deserts. There's a line that in Sydney that runs sort of diagonally this way, and it used to be called the latte line because above that line was where all the cafes were and so forth, right? But I prefer to call it the Red Rooster line because above that line you will not find a Red Rooster, and below that line you will find fast food outlets coming out of your wazoo, and we're finding those same situations, and because these retailers know that the immediacy and the lack of desire or the lack of consideration for consequence or future doesn't exist amongst these cohorts of people because they lack the belief in opportunity.
So I want to grab all of this, right? Because there's so much in this. But when are we going to take responsibility for the impact that we have, right? That's the attention to detail that fast food restaurants have in supplying their product, which isn't good for human consumption, right? When are they going to take responsibility for that? Or do we need self-responsibility and education around that? It's very interesting, right? Because what are we doing as a human species? Chunk it up, go up to the top, the very top. What does it mean to be human? What does that mean? Yeah. We don't have a value set based upon what it means to be human. We don't have a value set about what it looks like to really support one another. We do want to control markets. We do want to control people, right? And when we control things, we actually stop its growth. The more control we create, the less opportunity for growth because we don't allow things to flourish and bloom into what they should be. The Indigenous vote, this is a personal opinion. There's no, how much did we actually know about it? How much time have you actually invested in going into an Indigenous community, learning about what it is that they need and actually understanding it as a civilization?
Gosh, man, don't start me on that.
No, but I want to grab this, right? Because
Yep.
I'm ignorant to it. I don't have an opinion because I'm ignorant to it. Do I understand that as the Western world, we came to Australia as a white settler? Now, I don't know my full bloodline, but we came here and we didn't come here to understand how the land was worked. We didn't come here to understand what could we do to improve our technology by learning what the Indigenous communities do. We came here to bring the Western style of life onto the lands of Australia. All Australian native animals have padded feet. Why? Because it looks after the soil. All the European animals have hooves because it's wetter over there, so they need that to survive. But what's the damage and the impact that's had on the land? If we came here and we understood things, then we could grow together. Then maybe some of those practices could have gone back to Europe. Now, we can't change what's happened. That was a problem. But what we can do is we can own the problem. We can put our hands up and say, do you know what? We could have done better. We all agree on that. We all agree that that could have happened. And what is it we needed to learn? If we go back to that and look at it and go, okay, well, agriculturally, the rivers are really important, right? Rice is taking over our rivers, right? And we're stopping the flow. Those rivers had enough fish in them to feed us, right? The way they caught the fish, the Indigenous folk caught the fish was good for the environment. The environment's important. How could we use those agricultural practices to support Europe rather than coming over and just taking control and ownership of things and utilizing it for other ways of life? How about we just take the time to understand the bigger impacts? And I think that's where we're at in life. I think that's where we're at. Even the yes, no vote. Do you know what I love about it? It's bringing up questions. What is it really about? What is it that we really need to understand? Is it right or wrong? We're only going to know afterwards. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and show my lack of wokeness, people, because I have a distinct lack of wokeness when it comes to this. I'm offended by welcome to country, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
To me, the yes, no vote, no harm, no foul. Can I see enormous things coming from it? No. Can I see any damage coming from it? No. Do I think it's somewhat important to recognise? Of course, but the reason welcome to country offends me is that we stand there in corporate and in all sorts of environments, and we pay our respects. We pay our respects, we say, right? Now, I haven't seen our Indigenous community respected over the last 200 years. I haven't seen it, right? So we say we pay our respects, right? And I want to make that real point, right? I have a kid in high school who knows zero about Indigenous communities, who knows zero about Indigenous culture, right? Who came home from school the other year and said to me, "Why should I say sorry? I didn't do anything," right? And I'm like, "Well, what did your teacher say to you for you to get there?" Right? And my point is that we're out there saying things, but we're not doing things, and we're saying we pay our respects, and in my mind, we don't. We do not respect. Yeah. So that's why it offends me. For all of you woke people out there, come at me. I'm sure you're going to. But that's what offends me about it.
Yeah, and look, I can appreciate that, Scotty. I want to grab it though, because I think the key to actually coming together is you and I. I think that us middle-aged men can take the opportunity of actually going and learning more about what it means to be human. I think we could really go and if we go and understand Indigenous communities globally, not just here, we learn a different way of life, we're going to find new ways of existing. Yeah. I think that is the key. I would like to think that even the conversation, even the fact that you're offended, fantastic, right? I love that. I appreciate it if it triggers you into doing something about it. I appreciate it if it triggers you and goes, okay, what can I do to understand this better? What is it? How do I get curious about it so that I can make better decisions going forward? Because it's a pain point, right? I can sit here and I can talk about my pain point, right? And I can take it and I can project it. But who am I gifting that to?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm gifting that to the ones that I love. I'm gifting that to the ones that surround me. So how do I project my pain in a way that people can come towards me?
Yep.
Well, I talk about the lessons. Do you know what? I went through this. I was on the streets, and what I've learned about that is that my mum didn't have a safe place to process her situation in life. So she met somebody at her pain point. Now, when you meet somebody at your pain point, guess what? They're carrying their pain point because you meet where you're at. So therefore, that combined pain went into us kids, which then created more pain throughout my life. And it wasn't until I actually have had over the last 10 years the opportunity to understand me more and actually unpack all of that pain that I now can create the opportunities, which is this today, which is the socks, which is the opportunity to walk up to a lady, sleeping in her car with her son and go, listen, I just want to thank you for doing your best right now. I know it's hard, but there is sunshine. There is sunshine beyond your dark days. We just need time to find them. So
I think firstly, apologies, guys. We've gone way over the time that we promised ourselves we'd stick to. We always said we keep these to half an hour, but I want to make just raise a point that Lisa's made here about feeling similarly about mental health awareness. And I couldn't agree more, Lisa. I mean, one of the things about LinkedIn is that corporate life can be a facade, yeah. So, we rock up in a persona that we believe will be acceptable in that culture or in that environment. I've made posts about men's mental health, about men's suicide, about things like that. And I get all these comments from people going, are you okay? Is there something wrong with you? Like, why are you talking about this stuff? And so we avoid these topics that are, that are swelling out there. I mean, what's happening with men is a huge problem. Yeah. And yet if you speak loudly about men, and men's health, gee whiz, you might be in an equality battle there for some reason, right? You might be working against equality for some reason, or you might be working against, the necessary rise of women. We're in a society where we lack the curiosity to be empathetic and to understand the things that are really going on around us. I'm going to let you wrap this up, Scotty, because we've gone way over time.
Yeah, look, this is a very. I'd rather talk about this next week because it's pretty big. Because all we're trying to do is find an identity. We're trying to belong. We don't know where we belong, right? So when we've got no confidence in ourselves, when we don't know ourselves, we don't own ourselves, we're looking for justification from anywhere. So we will fight to hold on to that. For me, I'm about the human experience. Yeah, where my strength lies, where my label is, I support men to be the best versions of themselves because that way, that's what I know. That's where I spend my time. So you can educate me in different areas of life, and I'm happy to sit and have that conversation. But if I could ask you not to project your pain, but rather explain it to me and let me ask questions so I can get a better understanding so I can make better decisions, I think that'd be great. I'm going to wrap it up with one thing, Scotty.
Mhm.
No one ever makes a decision to make the wrong decision. I'm going to repeat that one more time. Nobody ever makes a decision to make a wrong decision. Only once they've made that decision do they know it's been right or wrong, and you get the opportunity to rectify it. The biggest problem is not making a decision, okay, because we can't do anything about it, indecision. So with that and all my heart, I just want to say thank you to anybody who's taken the time out of their life to even sit and listen to this conversation. I challenge you to challenge us so that we can take the opportunity to grow and make better decisions ourselves. So thank you. That's all I got, Scotty. If you want any more, Scotty, do you want any more out of me? Have you disappeared, Scotty? Scotty.
Oh, I actually just lost my sound for some reason. So
That's all right.
I hope what you said was impressive, by the way.
I'll have to ask Lisa.
I heard what you said, and I think that's really true. And I think again, just encourage people, even those of you that are out there espousing to help vulnerable people, be more curious. Be more curious about how you can meet people where they are. Yeah. Be more curious about why it is they're not engaging with your services. Be more curious about, what it is that's going on for these people, or what context or contextual elements have brought them to this space. And maybe, just maybe, you can help people more. Enough for me. Like because of the Scott thing, I'm so inclined to do the. Do you remember the two Ronnies? It's good night for me and it's good night for you. Like, we should probably come up with something like that.
What do you want to do for a sign off?
I think the last time I said something like it's time for us to put a sock in it. I think that was.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining and listening in. We'll see you next week.
It's time to put a sock in it. Get a press stop.